You're listening to Keeping It 100 with Mel and Bruce, sponsored by the 100 Black Men of Las Vegas. I'm Mel Tillar, your host. I am thrilled about this particular interview. We've been trying to get this gentleman on for a while. He's finally here, and we are looking forward to some great information and a great interview. Ladies and gentlemen, the Congressman and representative from District 4, Mr. Steven Horsford. Congressman Horsford, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mel. Great to be on. Great to be with the 100 Black Men and all the great work that you do in our community here in Las Vegas and all around the country.
Thank you so much. Listen, you are in Congress at one of the most extraordinary times in the history of this country. There are individuals who are openly attempting to change our country from a democratic country to an authoritarian country. How do you feel about being right in the middle of what's happening right now and the historic position that you find yourself in?
Well, Mel, look, I grew up here in Las Vegas. I'm a son of Nevada and overcame many obstacles raised by a single mother to even have the opportunity to serve in Congress today.
Yes.
And so first and foremost, I take it as an honor and a privilege to represent the people of the 4th Congressional District. And yeah, the times have chosen us for a moment such as this to be able to defend our democracy, to protect the fundamental institutions that we hold dear, from the court system to our schools, to voting, and to make sure that some of the most fundamental freedoms that we have had to fight for are not taken away. And worst yet, that we don't go even further back from the progress that we've made on the shoulders that we stand on, the leaders and the legends and the civil rights warriors who have gotten us to the point that we are, that we would allow anyone, let alone an authoritarian faction, an insurrection faction, or whatever you want to call them, faction, try to take us backwards. We're not going to let that happen because, as I do like to say, we have the power. When we use our power collectively to vote, to exercise our rights, we are able to preserve this great democracy and to make sure that it lives up to the ideals that we still wanted to live up to as a great nation.
Congressman, there are some clear differences between you and your opponent. Tell us about some of those differences.
Well, first, I try to focus on my record and the work that I've done.
Yes.
For me, it's not about a title. It's not about a position. It's about the work. It's about focusing on the needs of the people of Nevada's 4th District. And yeah, things are tough right now with the cost of living. Rent costs are up almost 30%.
Yes.
In Southern Nevada since 2019. The cost of everything from food to formula to gas. And these are the things that we are working to tackle every single day. And every vote that I take it with the mindset of what are we doing to help bring down cost and alleviate the stress that a lot of my constituents are facing economically. It's also about helping to make our community safer. My father was shot and killed when I was 19 years old. I was a freshman in college. And so I know the pain and effect that violence, particularly gun-related violence, has in our communities. And that's why I have championed legislation to break the cycle of violence, which has passed the House. We got a smaller investment in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act earlier this year for $250 million, but now I'm working to get the full package of $6.5 billion over 8 years funded to invest in community violence intervention and to disrupt crime before it ever starts by investing in young people, particularly 16 to 24-year-old young men Black men, men of color, who need more access to opportunity through education and training and apprenticeship, things that the 100 Black men stand firmly behind. And then finally, for me, it's about creating better jobs, better
Yes.
paying jobs and careers and entrepreneurship, because it's not only limited to working for someone, but it's also about creating your own business to help create jobs for others, something that I'm proud to have done and that I'm proud to continue to support from a policy standpoint. And by creating better jobs, we have to make sure that those jobs include all of us.
Yes.
That they don't leave out segments of the community that have historically been left out or left behind. We don't have onerous barriers to being considered for jobs and employment, that the training and opportunities are actually there for these new sectors, whether it's in healthcare, renewable energy, manufacturing, as I said, entrepreneurship. So I'm really proud to have been working with people like Commissioner William McCurdy, Councilman Cedric Creer, and others to embed these types of initiatives here in our local community based on federal resources that we're bringing to fruition.
Talk to me about jobs that will be created with clean energy.
So within the Inflation Reduction Act, which was signed into law, a provision of that bill invests $307.
Big deal.
In addition to reducing costs for prescription drugs, expanding provisions under the Affordable Care Act, it also invests the largest action around climate that any country in the world has ever taken. And it will create 9 million jobs.
Wow.
Jobs that run the gamut within energy space, on the construction side, on the operations side, as I said, on the development and engineering side. All of these electric vehicle charging stations throughout the country that are going to be built, more than 5,000 of them right here in the state of Nevada, will be built, right, with people that never worked in that sector before. I just met a business owner here who is working to win one of those contracts to do more of the electric vehicle charging station installations. And that's exactly what I want to see, a Black-owned business that was in the space as an electrician, but now is moving into what it means to actually install these EV charging stations. So 9 million jobs that represent every corner of our district and every community, particularly Black men and Black workers who deserve an intentional opportunity to work in this space. In the law, it requires 40% of the benefits to impact underserved, marginalized communities that are historically underrepresented. So there is an intentional provision that requires the Department of Energy and anyone who receives funding to work with communities like the one that I represent here in Southern Nevada.
You're listening to Keeping It 100 with Mel and Bruce, sponsored by the 100 Black Men of Las Vegas. And we're speaking with Congressman Steven Horsford. Congressman Horsford, tell us about the child tax credit. You know that 100 Black Men does a lot of work with young people, and our children are so important. How will the child tax credit change things for our community?
So one of the most significant provisions that was included in the American Rescue Plan, which was a critical piece of legislation that responded to the biggest and most unprecedented global pandemic that I've experienced in my lifetime. But one of the most important provisions in that law was the expansion of the child tax credit, which increased the tax credit from $2,000 per child to $3,100 per child. And it made the payment, we provided what's called an advanced payment, so people didn't have to wait to file their tax return in order to receive it. So on average, someone received about a $300 payment per month per child while that advanced payment was in place. That provision alone helped to lift 50% of children and more than 50%, almost 60% of Black children out of poverty. That's very consequential. If we didn't do anything else in this Congress, that alone should have shown the priorities that we have when we're in the majority. Because when the other side is in office, they give tax cuts to the very wealthy, to the big corporations, to the billionaires. We decided to provide relief to individuals and with families. Now, we also addressed the earned income tax credit so that people without children also were receiving a higher tax credit, recognizing that they needed relief, especially during the pandemic. So these are two important bills. I serve on the Ways and Means Committee. We drafted the legislation. We got it to the floor. We were able to get it through the Senate, and it passed and it was signed into law. Now, unfortunately, we need senators to also work with us to extend that benefit so that the tax credit extends for a longer period of time. I want it to extend permanently, but at least for a period of time, and to make it refundable so that provision there is in place to help families when they need it most.
A date that will live in infamy, January 6th, our Capitol was attacked. January 6th, when our vice president was hunted down. January 6th, when the Speaker of the House was hunted down. January 6th, when the members of Congress were interrupted from doing their constitutional duty. They had to stop what they were doing. They were hiding in the floor of the Capitol building. Talk to me about that date and talk to me about how is it that no one who organized, paid for, brought those people to the Capitol, those who were responsible for making that happen. None of those folks have been charged. None of those folks have been brought to justice. This is an amazing event in that we've never seen anything like this before. What is happening? How can we expect accountability for something like this?
Well, first, I was there that day. I was in my office preparing to defend Nevada's electoral vote. We were one of the states that had been identified by the opposition to challenge our electors. And so we were asked by leadership to speak on why our vote, in fact, was accurate and should be counted. And I was told by my staff that we had to evacuate. I knew going in that day that it was going to be a tense situation. I remember actually seeing some people with "Don't Tread on Me" flags and other paraphernalia, a lot of the MAGA hats and things like that on my way in. But I never in the life of me expected to see what transpired throughout the day.
Yes.
And what was the most troubling for those of us that were there, we didn't see the images except for what they were showing on TV. We didn't know the risk that we were under or the attack that was happening until later. And that day really did put into very clear perspective for me just how fragile our democracy is, and the fact that an attempted coup was committed. And had we not prevailed, that our elections, because it wasn't just an attack on a building, the Capitol building, as it was the worst attack on the US Capitol since the War of 1812. But it was more fundamental to that. It was someone who was the sitting president at the time inciting an insurrection against our fair and free elections because they didn't like the outcome, because they lost the election.
Yeah.
and that they were willing to go as far as to have Vice President Pence intimidated and or killed, to have the Speaker of the House and others hurt or killed, to have members of Congress, to have police officers, Capitol Police, attacked, beaten on the head with flagpoles, and some of them actually dying as a result of their injuries. Now, you talked about the accountability portion.
Yes.
Actually, later this week on Thursday, Chairman Benny Thompson and Vice Chair Liz Cheney will have their final hearing for the January 6th Select Committee. And I want to commend both of them. They're Democrat, Republican. Congressman Benny Thompson hails from the state of Mississippi. He has seen the worst of racism and discrimination in this country. But as the chairman of Homeland Security and now the chairman of the Select Committee on the January 6th attack, he has ably, I think, brought to the fore all of the facts with great detail and with as much objectivity, meaning this is just the facts. This is just what happened. And with Liz Cheney and other members of that committee doing their part, I believe that the truth is there. And I believe that their information will support the Department of Justice and other agencies that are still investigating. I agree, it's taken far too long.
Yes.
There were protesters a couple of years ago up at the Capitol who looked like you and me. They didn't get any further than the steps.
Yeah.
Because of how they were viewed and how they were treated versus how this mob of insurrectionists were treated. It shows you that we have a long way to go in our country. But most importantly, in this moment, there has to be accountability. It doesn't matter who that person is, what position they held. If the facts should lead where the facts lead, and anyone who was involved in the planning, organizing, or execution of that January 6th attack must be held accountable and be brought before the law. That's the way our process should work, and it must work in this case.
I want to thank you so much for joining us today. You've been extremely gracious with your time. What is the last word you would like to leave for our listening audience?
That the last word is that I know we tend to focus a lot on the other side and what they're doing and how egregious things are. And it's true. And for those who have lived longer than I, they know the obstacles that we've had to overcome. And I hear every day from constituents who are concerned about everything from our right to vote to our democracy to the divisions in this country, particularly around race. But what I've said is that we still have the power. I believe in the greatness of the American people and what we can do when we come together. I believe in creating opportunity for every single community and not to leave anyone out or anyone behind. I believe that when we vote, we do win. We just have to exercise the power that we have, and especially as Black men. Yes. And I don't care who you vote for, I don't care what party you ascribe to, but you have to have your voice counted in every single election, not just the presidential, but every single election and in every single race. Because now, as we're seeing, the Secretary of State positions are just as important as anything, because they're the ones who uphold the elections. They're the ones who decide if you get a mail ballot or if there's a polling place open in your community during early vote, or whether they challenge you on election day. So know that people that are running for that office matter. And we can't have people that are the election deniers be in charge of our elections. We've got Attorney General on the ballot who protects some of our fundamental rights when it comes to state law. That is incredibly important. We pass federal law, but then many of those things have to get implemented at the state level with Attorney General Ford. So my urging to anyone and everyone who's listening is to just make sure that we use our power. We are not powerless. We are powerful when we use it. And especially as Black men, we matter. Give it up to the Black women. They do their part. Yes. They vote. They vote sometimes even when it's not in their interest. That's not true of every other segment of the population, that sometimes vote against their interest just because they don't want to see the change that some of us want to see. We're pragmatic. We know that everything's not going to happen overnight, but we want to see action, and we have a sense of urgency that our community, the Black community, our Black children, our education, the access to economic opportunity are things that the Black community desperately needs. And that's something that I know the 100 Black Men stands on and stands for. Commend you for the work. In fact, we helped sponsor and pass the creation of the Commission on the social status of Black men and boys. And it's all around helping to better, and it's a bipartisan commission. I'm proud to be one of the commissioners. And it's all about learning and listening and identifying ways to better meet the needs of Black boys and young men and Black men. We have a specific set of issues and needs and policies and agenda that we have to also be advancing. So I look forward to sharing that information with you, Mel, as we get our initial recommendations. I would love to have a session maybe with the brothers to get input about things that they would like to see done in that regard. I know you all have a number of events throughout the year, and I think it'd be a great opportunity to make sure that some of the local work is also included on that National Commission and their work. So thank you for this opportunity.
We'd like to thank Congressman Steven Horsford. I heard you loud and clear. I'm going to hold you to that. We will look forward to getting that done. Congressman Steven Horsford, who is fighting to save democracy, that is not hyperbole. There are those who want to keep people like us from voting. There are those who want to take rights from people like us. And Congressman Horsford is in the middle of the battle. We thank him for his efforts, and we thank you, Congressman, for joining our show today.
Thank you.
So you've been listening to Keeping It 100 with Mel and Bruce, sponsored by the 100 Black Men of Las Vegas, and that's Keeping It 100.